BBC News, a very warm welcome if you're watching here in the UK, on PBS in America, or around the globe. My name is Mike Amberley. Our top stories. The entire senior police leadership for a city in New York State resigns over the death of a black man in custody. One of the leading opposition activists in Belarus rips up her passport to avoid being expelled from the country, as the president insists he is not stepping down. As fears rise of another global spike in COVID cases, the UK announces it will ban gatherings of more than 6 people. The South African athlete Caster Semenya loses her court appeal against the restriction of testosterone levels in female runners. Hello to you. Let's start though with some breaking news this hour. A large migrant camp on the Greek island of Lesbos is being evacuated right now because fire has broken out at the facility. We can show you some of the latest images coming in. I think these images on social media show flames inside and outside the centre. It's home to nearly 13,000 people. The cause of the fire still not immediately clear. We are getting some information coming through from the Reuters news agency. As we say, fires burning both inside and outside. That's quoting a fire brigade official. The police say that migrants are being taken to safety. People have been seen leaving the camp carrying luggage in their hands, according to witnesses. At least 28 firemen with 9 engines aided by volunteers battling the flames. So that gives you some idea of the scale of this. The facility is holding, it's thought, something like 4 times its official capacity. More than 12,000 people sent in. It has been frequently criticised by aid groups for living conditions there. The facility was placed under quarantine last week. Authorities confirmed an asylum seeker had tested positive for coronavirus. We understand confirmed infections have risen to 35 since then. Lesbos, of course, just off the Turkish coast on that front line of the massive movement of refugees and migrants to Europe in 2015-2016. Since March the 1st, because of the pandemic, all migrants reaching the island have been quarantined away from the camps. We'll bring you more on this just as soon as we have more, a little later in the bulletin. Now, the entire senior police leadership for the city of Rochester in New York State has resigned. This was in the aftermath of the death of a black man in custody. Rochester's police chief and other senior commanders have been under intense scrutiny since news of the death of Daniel Prude became public last week. That sparked protests. I've got the latest just now from our North America correspondent, Peter Bowes.
This happened back in March. Daniel Prude was known to have mental health issues. He was arrested by the police. He was naked in the street at the time. And during the course of the arrest, the police used what's known as a spit hood. Now, this is a hood, a device that's put over a suspect's head to protect police officers from the saliva of a suspect. So this was put into place, and his head was then forced onto the ground, and shortly after that point, he lost consciousness. He died in hospital a week later, and according to the autopsy report, he died of complications of asphyxia. Now, as I say, this happened back in March. It's only just come to light over the past week after members of the family managed to get body cam footage from police officers and made that public. And that has led to the allegation that the police were in some way trying to cover up what happened. And that's the central allegation that the police chief, who has now resigned, so strongly objects to.
It's quite a dramatic consequence, of course, of a death in custody, and there have been so many deaths in police custody. It's always tempting, isn't it, to draw more general lessons from the particular. It's not always appropriate. Do you think this has meaning for the rest of the country?
Well, there's still a long way to go on this. There's still an investigation underway. The 7 police officers who were involved in this were suspended, and their future is pending an investigation which is ongoing. Protesters have gathered several nights in a row since that footage was released, and they have been demanding justice for Daniel Prude. They've been demanding changes in the way that the police operate and especially deal with people who have mental health issues. And of course those are some of the issues that on a national basis have concerned many people, how the police interact with suspects, and this was an African American man, and of course this happened before the George Floyd arrest, which was actually quite similar circumstances.
Peter Bowes first there. Governments in Europe and Asia are grappling with a surge in coronavirus infections and struggling to gain control. In the past few hours, the British government has announced new rules on social gatherings in England to take effect from Monday. Only 6 people will be allowed to meet indoors or outside. Full details will be outlined by the Prime Minister Boris Johnson on Wednesday. Here's our political correspondent Nick Eardley.
I think it reflects a real concern in government and amongst the scientific experts who advise ministers at the number of cases we've seen in recent days, that rise in the number of positive tests for coronavirus that we've been talking so much about. Clearly, part of the concern is that we're meeting too many people, that there are too many social interactions, some of which are leading to transmission of the virus. So it's not designed to stop people going to work, it's not designed to stop kids going to school or for universities to stop opening, but it's designed to stop us meeting in each other's houses and to meet up outdoors. So the big headline figure will be that indoors or outdoors the limit will be 6. That changes the rules on 2 households meeting. For example, at the moment 2 households can meet no matter what the size. The guidelines at the moment say that if you're meeting up outdoors it can be 6 people from as many households as you want, but that limit is 6. But that's now being brought into law, and it's partly because police were concerned, and they've relayed these concerns to Downing Street, that the rules weren't simple enough, that it wasn't easy enough to intervene where large groups under 30, which had been the legal limit, to intervene when those groups were meeting up in various places. But as I say, I think it just shows that ministers are increasingly worried about transmission of this virus.
Nick Eardley first. New Zealand's largest city, Auckland, has recently emerged from its second lockdown. The spread of COVID seems to be back under control. The city looks on track to eliminate the virus again. So what can the rest of the world learn? Maybe from New Zealand. Ask Professor Rod Jackson, epidemiologist at the University of Auckland.
Well, I think the first one is that elimination is possible. We did it for 100 days. We've now got another limited outbreak in Auckland, but that seems to be under control. So we're well on the way to another elimination. So I think that's a key message. And I think a lot more countries could do elimination than currently believe they can.
Do you know what people are going to say? I mean, I know New Zealand well, I'm half Kiwi myself, but people will say New Zealand has factors in its favour. It's a special case.
I think that is untrue. Australia, outside of Victoria and New South Wales, who were basically eliminated, aside from those 2 states, the rest of Australia is in the same situation as us. Taiwan, 20 plus million people, is at or close to elimination. Cambodia, I mean, there are a number of countries that have done this. So I think it's incorrect to say that New Zealand's a special case.
It's interesting, isn't it? I know there was clear leadership there was clear messaging, but it's not necessarily a given that the population gets behind that people get on board.
No, I mean, that's true, and I think we've been incredibly fortunate to have excellent leadership. They've taken the public with them, they communicate well. There's a very clear strategy right from early on that elimination is our goal. There's also been incredible, I think, respect for the science from the politicians. They listen to the epidemiologists, and indeed, every experienced epidemiologist in the country is on board with the elimination strategy. So we've had one clear message from both the scientists and from the politicians, and the vast majority of the population are behind it.
How would you sell the elimination and lockdown message to countries already in recession. You see the economy as the big crisis.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the worst thing for the economy, and I'm not an economist, I have to be clear about that, is lack of business confidence. And if you go out on the street and you're worried about an infection that will kill 1 in 100 people in less than a month, I can't see that that's going to be doing much for business confidence. Whereas in New Zealand, you know, between our outbreaks, you've got the confidence to go out and not risk the chance of catching a disease that will kill 1 in 100 people in a month. I think elimination is the way to get business confidence.
Professor Rod Jackson there. A major trial of a coronavirus vaccine developed by Oxford University and AstraZeneca has been put on hold worldwide because of a suspected serious adverse reaction in a volunteer in the UK. An independent investigation will review the safety data before regulators decide whether the trial can restart. Our medical editor Fergus Walsh reports.
More than 10,000 volunteers in the UK, many of them elderly, have been immunised with the Oxford coronavirus vaccine. Several thousand more have received the jab in South Africa, Brazil and the United States. This is actually the second time the trial has been put on hold since it began in April. Such pauses are triggered any time a volunteer is admitted to hospital and the cause of their illness is not immediately apparent. An Oxford University spokesperson said in large trials, illnesses will happen by chance but must be independently reviewed. The final decision on restarting the trial rests with the medical regulator, the MHRA, and that could happen within days. Until then, no more volunteers will be immunised at any of the international sites. The Oxford University team believe this process illustrates that they're committed to the safety of their volunteers and the highest standards of conduct in their studies.
Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
Do stay with us if you can on BBC News. There is much more to come, including this, rolling into retail. The Rock Guards have opened a store where you can get what you need.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning, and freedom will be defended. The United States will hunt down and punish those responsible.
Bishop Tutu now becomes spiritual leader of 100,000 Anglicans here, of the blacks in Soweto Township as well as the whites in their rich suburbs.
We say to you today, in a loud and a clear voice, enough of blood and tears. Enough!
The difficult decision we reached together was one that required great and exceptional courage.
It's an exodus of up to 60,000 people caused by the uneven pace of political change in Eastern Europe. I am free!
Welcome back. Very glad to have you with us on BBC News. The latest headlines for you. A large migrant camp on the Greek island of Lesbos is being evacuated right now because fire has broken out at the facility. These are the latest pictures just coming in from that. We have some information coming in on Reuters. Other information is a bit sparse at the moment. It is known as a very overcrowded camp. We understand there's something like 4 times the official capacity, more than 12,000